So last night I received a rather frantic message from somebody who I had read for a couple of days prior to their message, and their message was one that was filled with a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry towards the cards that I have pulled out for them in the reading. And I usually show what cards people get in case they are visual people and they want something to look at while hearing me explain, but I'd much rather them focus more on what I have to say about the cards rather than focusing on the cards, because tarot is dramatic. At the end of the day, tarot cards are pieces of art, and anyone that has studied art or just appreciates art knows that the more kind of obvious the messages are, the more effective it can be about what message they could be conveying. And that's why when you first go into the world of tarot and you pick out your first Tarot for Learners book and you go online and search for different meanings and you jump into that world, frustratingly, the darker cards, the more negative, the typically negative ones, are the ones that are easier to learn. They're a lot more straightforward. I think it's because they're more self-explanatory. The symbolism in the cards, obviously this card is about sleepless nights, anxiety, depression. Whereas you move to wands, maybe, where there isn't really many negative cards, and it's harder to get a precise message and understand what they all could be saying together. So if you're reading for one of the first times and you've got certain keywords in mind when it comes to the more dramatic cards in tarot, that's probably going to make you hold your breath when you're shuffling and make you squirm when you turn over the card and you get death. And I think the first thing to say is, with experience and with more familiarity to each card, seeing it pop up more often and being more used to it and saying, oh god, here we go again, this is the same card as what I got last month, being able to realize that this card will pop up multiple times in your life, and it has done and it will continue to, will just make you more comfortable with it. And I think that you'll realize how it reflects in your day-to-day life can be very different to how your imagination and your anxiety can make you worry about how you believe it is going to show. And ironically, being an anxious person can reflect in your reading. So if you're reading about a relationship that you're worried about, how is it going to be with your partner in the future? If you've got the Nine of Swords and you start thinking something bad's going to happen to put you in a space where you're having loads of sleepless nights, you're not able to relax, you are riddled with anxiety. And the kind of ironic thing about this is, if you're going to stress about receiving a card like this, you're putting yourself in that exact position of the Nine of Swords. So your own anxieties will be picked up in readings, and I had to learn that the hard way. I've been through it, and I think all tarot readers have relied too much on cards at one point, or overanalyzed them, stressed about them. When I do my own readings, I keep the expression "take it with a grain of salt" over and over now, because I like to take pictures of what I've pulled, or I write them down in a journal, write the definitions, write what I've picked up, write any predictions I've felt, close the book and moved on. I've tried my best to only read it properly later on, so I have some life experience that I can kind of work out what those cards were picking up on, rather than going into the future thinking, oh my god, what could these cards be telling me is going to happen. I've read about a situation that I really wanted more information on, and a situation that I was really worried about and obsessing over and a bit too dependent on, and the cards would always come up as negative, and I would be like, well, what's going to happen? Why do these look so bad? Why are there so many swords? Well, for starters, my thought patterns weren't good, so no wonder why I was getting lots of crazy cards, and I wasn't being open-minded. I was being very dependent on the issue I was reading about. So there's me saying, why is there the devil? He's the devil. Well, the situation was controlling me. I was becoming too engrossed by what I was reading about. You need to bear in mind that it's picking up on energy from you as well as the situation. So if I'm reading about leaving home, and I'm worried about how I will cope and how that will be for me. And I got Tower card, 3 of Blades. I need to bear in mind that I am aware I will probably experience homesickness, and I need to be open to the fact that emotions are a thing, feelings are a thing. I can't pretend that my reading's going to be airy fairy roses and cherries, because there will be moments of struggle, and you can't freak out about it. And I mentioned this to the lady who messaged me, who was a bit anxious about her reading. I mentioned this to her. It's more important to look at the cards afterwards, actually. So, for example, I'm doing a lot of yearly forecast readings at the moment, which basically tell you how your 2021 is going to go. So there are 12 different cards, and each card will represent each month of the year. If you want one done, then make sure you message me on Facebook or Instagram. When bad cards pop up, say in June, July, I think it's beneficial to look at then what's going to happen in August, September, October, because that's how you cope with the situation. That's how you get over it. That's what the outcome, I guess, of the situation is. Because you can't deny that some shitty things are going to happen. Some bad stuff's going to happen. Bad people are going to walk into your life. Financially, things can sometimes be a bit more of a struggle some months than others. You can fall out with friends. You can slip up a little bit health-wise one month and then recover by the next. So I think it's more important to see where that takes you than anything. So another thing to mention, I think, if you get a negative answer, I always say, okay, what do I need to know then? Because what's the point in reading tarot cards if we can't do anything about the results? Like, I always say the future is fluid. So what I mean by that is I don't believe that any of the cards are set in stone, because what is the point in reading if we're just going to put ourselves through that twice? So let's say that if we're asking, how will my presentation go, and I was to get the 10 of Swords. If I saw that was something that was coming, that was in the horizon, not only am I setting myself up to failure, because I'm telling myself it's going to happen like this regardless, so it's going to be terrible anyway, so I may as well not even practice, I may as well not even try, because look, this is going to be me after my presentation. What use is that? Oh, okay, the presentation's not going to go very well. Great, can't wait to experience that. Like, there's no point in reading cards if they don't give us a bit of heads up, a warning in a way. It's like a lot of these darker, more negative, difficult cards are actually pieces of advice, and flipping every single dark card, and I promise you every card gets a lot lighter and more positive when we translate it into advice. So particularly if you're asking for advice, like, what do I need to know? What should I know? And you get the Tower card. As advice, you need to start from scratch. You need to really shake things up, because you need to really pull what you know and what is, and your ideas and your belief systems, like your plans, what you've organized. You need to rip them out with like roots included, and start again, start fresh. Like, that's the positive. Even the 3 of Swords, as advice, it's saying express yourself. Let that black ink out of the heart, whether that's using like creative tools. And speaking of, I think in this deck called the Everyday Enchantment Tarot deck, she is actually in front of a sewing machine, and I really like that they've done that, because it's telling me that this card is mostly about expressing yourself, letting yourself heal by feeling the feels. So even as advice, this is saying, make sure you're not suppressing any of that. Let it out, let it leak, let it do its thing, because that's how we get over things quicker. So somebody could be haunted by this card. They could be getting it all the time, and then they're waiting for heartache and heartbreak to happen. Betrayal and being let down, etc. But there might actually be some healing that they need to focus on. They might need to express something that they're keeping inside. Some of the best artists and the most powerful work has been made by some of the saddest and difficult moments in people's lives, and expressing yourself through an art form, it could be enticing you to do that, particularly if you also get maybe a lot of wands surrounding it as well. And that's another thing. It's really important to look at cards surrounding cards that are close to your dark card, because I think, like I was saying about when you go into tarot learning all of this stuff, as humans I think we remember the negative things a lot more in general. For example, when I receive one negative comment amongst 20 positive, the negative one sits in my head longer and I think about that one more than I do the positive. The same way as if someone was to tell you your hair looked disgusting when you were at college or school, you're going to remember that for the rest of the day and not remember how nice your best friend was in the morning to you. So it's easy to see a big black card in the middle of really bright, sunny, happier ones and just focus on this. But you need to bear in mind all of these cards are talking to each other, talking with each other. Then there's probably something that is being ignored internally, or there's some like inner demons when it comes to your thoughts. The fact that people might worry about their reading when there are a lot of swords in their reading quite honestly reflects maybe the kind of person that they are. Like, they worry a lot. Their mind takes over quite easily. Their emotions take over quite easily. And that's something to consider as well, because it's like picking up on your energy, like I was saying. And also you can't forget to bear in mind that ultimately, if a lot of the cards seem positive, and there are a lot of good things too, ultimately things are looking up, things are looking fine, but there are still maybe you maybe worry for no reason. You're anxious about the future, and when things go well, you will worry. You that's just who you are. You're like a natural worrier. I like to take a look at a few cards that are concerning me. I'm like, right, okay. I usually do this with cards like the Seven of Swords, because this can usually be someone who's sneaking around doing something deceiving, or like the Devil, because I want to know who this is. Like, is this a manipulative person, or is this more of like a substance abuse sort of situation? So I look at a card that's concerning me, or even the Five of Swords, because that can be about arguments and conflicts. So I sit with it, and if I'm reading for someone else, I say, so what do they need to do? What does my client need to remember? How do they approach the situation? Because like I said, like, what's the point in reading cards and then just freaking out about what's to happen? Like, the aim of reading is to see anything that we might need to wake ourselves up to and do something about it. Like, see it as a positive when a bad quote unquote card comes along, because that's what we're reading for. That's what tarot's there for, like telling us stuff that we need to know and is important for us to know. Ironically, instead of getting a card like the Devil card and then letting the reading rule our life like the Devil frickin' does, we need to remember why we read in the first place and saying, okay, thank you, like, I take your message, I understand there is something here that I need to be aware of. What do I do? Like, I could ask, who does the Devil represent? What is the Devil representing? I could ask, what do I need to do to release myself from this very controlling force, or this toxic force, or this energy that is keeping me stuck? And then you act on what those cards are asking you to do to avoid the negative cards, the negativity that you're picking up on in your reading. And before I finish this video, I just wanted to give some examples of how you can put a positive spin on even the most scariest looking cards. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. Let's start off, and I'll prove that by starting off with the typical Death. What I like doing is looking at how other decks, and this is why it's so much fun to have lots of decks, represent the same meaning. I mean, this is the traditional, almost, it's not the traditional, it's based on the traditional. But then the Everyday Enchantment deck shows Death in a very literal meaning of like the circle of life. See how there's an older person communicating with a younger one, and there's like a spirit in the background. It's kind of representing the cycle that we all kind of have to go through. I know that's a very literal death meaning, but that can be reflected on anything that you're reading about. Some good things have to come to an end. It's like things that are no longer serving a purpose in your life. Things that are, sometimes we need that. Like, this is saying goodbye to the things that we don't need to put our attention to anymore. And I mean, we can wish and hope for new opportunities all the time, and I recently did a reading for someone who had loads of new opportunities coming up, but as positive as you can say that is in a reading, how open and accepting are we towards letting some things go to make room for new things? Sometimes we don't want to leave something behind in order to do that, but we can't have everything. We can't have like loads going on at once. Some things need to be pushed away, pushed aside. We need to walk away from them. But like I said, it's all about what happens after this. So I see a card like this and I'm like, where's he going? So when I see something, particularly death, I love doing this with the death card. I like pulling for where's he walking from and where's he walking to, because that gives me an idea of what kind of energy he's dropping and what energy he's bringing in. And that might give you a bit of peace of mind if you get a card like this, because it gives you some context and it makes you realize it's not as crazy as maybe your state of mind is making it out to be. And like I said, when you experience the death card come up more often, you pull it more frequently, you'll start translating the death card to actual real life everyday experiences rather than something crazy that your mind's telling you. So then when you pull it again, you'll realize, oh, this is just me, you know, leaving my course because I graduate this year, or this is just me finishing up with an essay that I've been working on for a month, or, you know, this is me leaving behind some toxic friendships that I don't want in my life anymore. And like, I mean, I read for myself a lot. I mean, I read a lot less than I used to, but I've read for myself tons of times, and I've had all of these cards come up multiple times in different positions, and I've had like 3 negatives in one reading once, and look, I'm still here, I'm still fine. Nothing like traumatic has happened in my life to throw me off course and throw me off so much that I'm not able to cope. Like, I'm living proof that it doesn't mean you're going to combust into flames or die. So with the devil, a really nice positive spin I always think of anyway when it comes to the devil is it's making you aware that there's something that you're not aware about. So that's a really big positive to me anyway, because it kind of makes me think, ooh, like, what's holding ties on me that I didn't realize was? Because actually, when you start thinking a bit more about what holds you down and holds you back, it's quite empowering to figure that out and then work out how we can do something about that. A lot of us kind of need shaking up, like to be reminded that there's certain things that are stopping us from progressing, and we don't actually realize what has too much power over us a lot of the time. And if you focus on the chains around their necks, they are very, very loose, and these two people can very easily just pick that chain up, take it off, and walk away from what does look petrifying and scary. And no wonder why we need to be reminded sometimes that there's something taking too much control over us, because like, look at the devil, they can't stop looking at it because he's the devil. Like, he's a really massive force, a huge energy that they can't really focus on anything else. So we might have a lack of moderation in our life, we might rely on something too heavily. That could be drugs, alcohol, partying. It could just be a person. We depend on them too much, or it's whatever's taking away from your own personal power. And that's, to me, it's a positive. Like, that could even be if I'm on my phone too much, if I'm on social media too much. That still counts as a devil moment, a devil card moment. Though, you know, it looks like really intense, and like I said, tarot is very dramatic, but it's trying to be dramatic so you can read it well, and that's just art at the end of the day. It's actually, ironically, like, if you think about it this way, you shouldn't be putting too much thought and focus around the swords, because these represent words that this person's been told, you know, the truth of the matter, things that are hurting, things that are putting her down, you know, betrayal, backstabbing. And these could represent lots of different people, lots of different thoughts, lots of different events that have happened that is like really hurting her mental health. But what you want to focus on is actually her. I mean, this art really shows that really well, how she's on her phone rather than focused on those swords, but she's not doing anything about those swords in the background. So actually what you could say is it's the approach, it's the way you're approaching the situation. So instead of stressing about what sort of things could be happening, like how she's getting hurt, it's whether she deals with it, how she deals with it. And getting a card like this in the future is telling you that you haven't yet got those 10 swords in your back, so what can you do before they become 10? You might be currently experiencing 5. You might be let down by half the amount of people or events or things as she is right now. So it's about getting up while you still can, having the energy while you still can, while you're not bleeding out like she is, so you can tackle it in the bud before it becomes a bigger issue, before it becomes too hard and heavy. And like I'm saying with the other This one says everything is fine at the bottom because that's her attitude. It's not fine, clearly. It's ironic, it's sarcastic. Everything is fine. She's like, yeah, look at these swords on my back, everything's great. So you should stop putting the focus on what these bad things could be, and you should focus on yourself. A lot of these dark cards are about your inner higher power being taken away from you because it's by thoughts, by the mind. Too much of it. It's too heavy. I always think that you can't tell which of these swords are even real because she's dreaming them up in bed. It's a bit like when someone says they've seen something at the end of their bed before. It's hard to tell if that was something they actually experienced, actually saw, or did they dream it? Did they imagine it? It's late at night, they're tired. So I always think like she's got her hands over her eyes as well. She's not even seeing her problems properly. She's actually thinking them. She's covering her eyes. She's thinking of all these issues she's got and these worries she's got, and she's like almost creating them in her bedroom as if they are there, but they're not. They don't even exist. So a massive positive spin I always tell to people when they see a card like this is that a lot of the stuff you're worrying about isn't even there. It doesn't even exist. You're not able to see what is real and what isn't with the attitude that you have. And also worrying about stuff which is usually future based. She's worried about the future, worrying if it's going to go wrong or badly. You're putting yourself through it twice. So if you think that something's going to go wrong, you're sad about that because you've mentally put yourself there already. And then when the experience comes and if it does go wrong, you have to experience all of that over again. So you're putting yourself through it twice, which ironically is even worse than the fact that you were worried about how you're going to go through it once. Three of Swords, I kind of mentioned how that's about expression. It's saying like, have a good cry, let it out, cry, just feel, just do it, just have a Bridget Jones moment and just have a little bit of a meltdown. It's okay to let yourself be a human from time to time. Let's talk about the lovely Tower card. I like the Tower moment every now and again because I don't like change, and if I don't have the universe throw crazy things at me, I will never change. I will do the same thing over and over and over again. I will never invite myself to rip myself from my beliefs and, you know, the things that I've always known and always was. So the Tower moment is basically, in a positive light, it's asking you to change, to shake things up, to shift things about, because what you're currently building on is just kind of like autopilot. You're building. You need to sometimes be thrown off track, completely thrown off path, to force yourself to think about what's worth rebuilding again. Because sometimes we've been building for so long, you just don't really focus on like if you're enjoying it anymore, if it's worth it anymore. As shit as sometimes it can be when you get, I don't know, kicked out your flat, or your friend tells you they don't want to be your friend anymore, or something like really throws you off course and you're like you feel back to the bottom again. If you get fired, you know, it's like going back to the drawing board and being like, what means the most to me? Where do I want to begin again? What's worth beginning again? When I felt that I was on top of things and I felt on top of that tower and I had built an empire, what part of that success I had then was worth creating again? Was worth building for again? I'll probably go into these cards in more detail, like in separate videos for separate cards. That might be quite fun. Like I said, with conflict cards such as the Five of Swords and Seven of Swords, these are just usually people, external forces that I need to be wary of. Asking what I can do, what is in my power when it comes to dealing with a situation will really help lighten the blow of these cards. As advice, it isn't negative at all. It's saying be tactful, be sneaky. In a lot of decks, this is like a thief. And in order to avoid behavior like that in our lives, we kind of have to get in the mind of someone who would do something like that to avoid coming across someone like that. Does that make sense? And even as advice for the Five of Swords, this is about not thinking before speaking. So just making sure that you don't say anything too rash, you don't make any bold moves because you might end up regretting it because it ends up hurting a few people. It's just being more cautious about what you say and do and who that could affect. Picking battles that are worth actually fighting for, because sometimes they're just not. Sometimes the actual reason why you want something so bad isn't strong enough to hurt some people along the way. Do you know what I mean? But as advice, this could be saying like, you gotta fight the fight, particularly if you've got a lot of other cards that are, if you're reading about something like how to get something that you really want, or like, you know, there's competitive energy around the situation. Like this could just be saying like, You gotta fight to prove to others and yourself how much you want something. I love how I'm like, fight. I don't condone fighting, just saying. Quite similarly to the other swords cards, the Eight of Swords, she has swords around her to get herself out of this restriction she's in. She literally could edge her way up to one of those swords and free herself, a bit like the Devil card with the loose chains. So it's very, very similar. In these dark cards are usually about how the reader is interpreting things, is approaching things, is seeing things. It's usually really restrictive and holding themselves back for reasons they don't need to. So actually a lot of these negative cards are just themselves seeing the situation in the wrong light or negatively, or not coming from a grounded starting point, not coming from grounded energy, feeling too emotionally invested or putting themselves down too much mentally, telling themselves they can't because, you know, the devil holds them back, whatever the devil means to them in their life. Even the Five of Cups, it's a card of grieving and mourning, right? The fact there's a bridge in the background giving you a very subtle hint of build a bridge and get over it, girl, because there's two cups behind her that are full, that are upright. There are blessings in her life that once again the reader isn't focused on, because they're focused on the things that didn't work out, the things that no longer exist. You could stress about what those things are going to be, like what is she mourning, what's the loss that she will be experiencing, but ironically, you're doing exactly what she's doing, which is focused so much on the things that are going to be pushed away from her in life and spill over in life, and that's going to stop you from focusing on, you know, good friendships, your great boyfriend, your nice house, the fact you can wake up in the morning and eat food, the fact you've got money. Like, it's ironic actually worrying about the negative cards that you've got in a reading, because you're doing exactly what the negative cards are telling you that you will do. And you are doing. I hope this helped. I hope it gave you some clarity and some uplifting energy, and you feel a little bit more like free and you can breathe a bit more now. I will make more videos on this if you enjoy this. Let me know you enjoy these kinds of videos by giving me a thumbs up. I'm on social media such as Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I have a tarot reading Facebook page and I have a Patreon account. Thank you so much to my biggest patrons for supporting me over on there. It means the world. And if you would like to book a 2021 yearly forecast reading, then you can DM me on any of my social medias or email me in the email in my video description below. Thank you everyone, and I will see you for my next video. Bye!